YouTube. Good evening. So it's been a little while since I've done a video here. So tonight I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to switch back over to another screen and maybe holding an object up to get my cam 1 to focus a little bit better, because I'm having a little sequence phenomenon with the autofocus. It may have something to do with the fact that I have two cameras going into the processor. We'll see how it all works out. There's another video of this same sculpture that I'm going to share tonight on my other channel, and that link will be down below in the description. And with no further ado, here's the sculpture. It's called Touch. So this is a piece, very early bronze, that I did back in 2014, 15, something like this. And this is kind of a test booth that I've set up to get the second cam dialed in, which is taking me about 4 or 5 days, maybe 6. 2 Elgato cam links and various cables, 4 to 5 hours of tutorials on different settings and ISOs and quality, etc. The camera that's recording this is the let's see, it is the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II. So far, so good. It has been a journey. So this piece is 16 inches tall, 9 inches from thumb to pinky, and most of this piece is solid bronze. I did the original wax, and most of my waxes are pretty thick as far as traditional bronze casting goes, so it's pretty hefty. It's probably around 25 pounds. And of course the hand is solid. This is a 4-piece mold. So I had it cast in raw bronze and then brought the pieces home, and I have a MIG welder with bronze wire, silicon bronze, and I welded it up, and lots of Dremel work, cold chiseling, polishing. I did the patina on it as well. And this is it. I hope the video quality turns out really nice for the viewers. I'm still dialing these things in. I'm noticing when I did a preview of a previous recording that the video looks a bit different, but my main focus is getting it in focus. So this is a huge step forwards in finally resolving the fuzzy resolution that I had going on. And I did so many things, I'm not exactly sure what I did to fix it. So I'm going to switch back over in just a second here. There's not much story behind this piece. Sometimes I just start sculpting and the story never arrives. Simply, it's a ritual of sorts, and oftentimes the story is implied in the title, and you can basically take the headline and run with it. You can see there's various little fairy villages tucked here and there. The vertical mass that's to the, like, right down below the pinky there. That's a whole totemic fairy village, one built on top of the other. And then there's a mushroom shaman on the pinky, and then another mushroom bunch coming from the thumb. And then those little ovals you see there, those are hornets' nests way up high, away from any danger, and as bees do. And then under the thumb, there's what's supposed to be an old school UFO made of wood. And then the tree trunk that's right below the palm, that saucer shape is a retired UFO that's been turned into a kind of a lodge for the fairies. And you could see a row of steps going up to it. And then down below, each side is a mask. So you've got tribal faces and collages there, kind of reminiscent of Aztec or Inca or Mayan, but not so much. A little. It's hard to. I don't think anyone can do anything totemic that doesn't relate to something that doesn't already exist in the primordial archaeological catalog. And then at the very top of this square, there's the tree trunk roots, and then the roots are also growing vertical as they do in swamps. So this has a bit of a swampy vibe to it. So that's touch, which is available from the studio. Feel free to reach out if you're interested. I'm doing a fundraiser for the next year or two, maybe. And I'll be showing a lot of sculpture on this channel, mixed in with commentary. So I'm going to switch back to the solo screen. Just want to show you this piece tonight. This is, again, a very early piece. Probably only as far as larger pieces go, this is like the second or third first larger pieces. This was after what I call the original family. Switch back over. And then I'm going to get up and turn off the camera, and I'll be right back. So that was different. I'll try and get the transition a little smoother next time. Thank you for your patience. It's been pretty kinetic around here lately. Let's see. I think the focus is looking pretty good. I want to talk tonight about current events and some perceptions I've had over the last 3 or 4 days. Gaza is still under siege. Lebanon is pushing back in a big way. And supposedly there's a mass migration out of Israel. A lot of people from the north getting on planes and taking off, uh, which is not a bad thing. I think it's a smart thing to do. Uh, there's a certain level of obstinance with the Israeli project. It's not too big to fail if the world doesn't support it. And I think that's what's happening. I think that slowly there's a humanitarian attrition that's occurring, a vibe based attrition, and it's being fought on the propaganda level quite a bit from day one. Ultimately, that is day one of 1948, and in post uh, when when things started happening with Gaza. Um, things have always happened with Gaza. October 7th is not was not the beginning of the conflict. Uh, so ultimately, my thoughts are kind of not scattered, but compounded in some ways, and my emotions too. It's been a pretty wearing um, for 3 or 4 days, I think, and a lot of it has to do with uh, to kind of put it in abstract forms, absorbing shadow play from others, and which is ultimately, in old school terms, it would be taking on someone else's baggage and confronting it, or not necessarily arguing it, but resisting it, let's say verbally, but with reason. And what I have found is that you can't really reason with a person when they are, uh, I mean, they have moments of maybe hearing you, but they don't have enough time to listen. And it's a very, well, it can get rough because when you're in a position of having to defend a boundary while also having to be where you are, um, you can't just walk off uh, your where you're employed. Um, so in a way, you have to take some of that because it's just in your proxy, like in your space, and so what I have found is that when you're not heard, and you know you're not heard, you often start having conversations with the person inside your head, and that's pretty heavy duty too, because it's definitely a one way street where you're pretending to listen to yourself talking inside your head to a self that is not the person you want to speak to. It's it's a bit humbling and comical in a way, but at the same time, it's kind of an autopilot setting. I think that like a soft coping mechanism that occurs where at least you're getting something off, or maybe you're just practicing for when you do possibly have the opportunity. Either way, you just endure it. And so, what I found is that when someone's shadow projecting, um, they need you to be the screen. And if you don't give them back the response that they're looking for, they become all discombobulated and exasperated, almost as if um, they're beside themselves. And it's almost as if time stops a little bit, or at least slows down. It's an interesting phenomenon because if you, within the configuration of the disagreement or confrontation, if in the storm you're able to slide to the left a little bit or the right, and just do an internal pause while it's happening and make different choices, deliberately make different choices than the ones that are right up in your face, ready to roll, ready to go. And instead of saying anything, not say anything, and then say something that is counterintuitive to what your personality would normally say, or what would normally be a common sense reactionary response to someone else basically losing their shit. And so when you, and it's not so much like turn the other cheek or give compassion, because there's not a whole lot of room with compassion when the jungle is on fire and elephants are riding lions and monkeys are carrying baby alligators, and you know, everything's upside down and nothing makes any sense, but it's still working. Everyone's getting out pretty much safe. Um, and some aren't. Um, so when the jungle's on fire, certain emotions just simply don't work, and at least not in a two-way street situation. You can have private compassion for someone while they're going off the rails, but you can't. There's not much you can do as far as sharing it in the storm. So when you don't resist someone's accusations or uh, needling, poking the bear, kicking the hornet's nest, um, antagonizing, because trauma needs to antagonize in order to get its engine going. It's kind of like an old Model T Ford where you have to put, you've got the crank under the driver's seat, and you pull that out, you go up, and you crank the engine, you turn the camshaft manually, and so that's what trauma needs. It needs to antagonize in order to get the camshaft turning and the pistons firing and the carburetor exploding, and exhaust starts to uh, to do its thing, and it's a catharsis. It's old school psychology calls it acting out. So ultimately, um, either you've triggered someone and they're acting out, or their own imagination has triggered them and they're coming to you with that already prepackaged, microwaved, and ready to roll. And I would just say, don't argue with it, or argue just enough to set quiet boundaries, or another choice, if you, if you don't want to go full zen, um, you indicate or acknowledge that you see them. Um, Sometimes that doesn't always come out the greatest. Like, I see you. Like, that's not that's not the greatest thing to say to flaming creatures coming out of the jungle. Sometimes it just has to happen in order to set a boundary, to let the other half of the person, or a quarter or a third, let them know that you're you're here also. So the I see you can be confrontational, but sometimes it's just a chance you have to take to get some footing in the chaos. And ultimately, to make a long story short, I would say the best thing to do is not get entangled and become the character that they're looking for themselves. Um, don't believe what they're saying, and not in the sense of arguing with the person, but understand that they're expressing a part of themselves and not talking about you. Uh, Although your name's going to come up, because that's projection and deflection, and but ultimately you're a mirror uh, they're looking into, and there's something else going on, and it's tricky. Each formula is a little different for each situation, and of course each person. Um, there's no perfect way to do it. All I can say is, at least with this particular event, is if you have an issue with someone and you know something's coming, it's good to practice, like, what are they looking for? What do you intuit the projection to be, or their issues to be? And how would that reflect on you if you were to become the target of their angst? And then reverse that and think to yourself, well, what do I need to be to not give them what they're looking for? So there's a strategy, and it doesn't mean to completely abandon your friend or acquaintance. It just simply means uh, a strategy of self-preservation, mature boundaries, and helping by not helping, which basically means if you don't give the projection what it's looking for instance, a reactionary traumatic response, and you don't deny them by being predictable, there's still going to be tension, but you hold your own, and you survive intact. Your autonomy survives intact by staying in charge and not getting entangled in imitating their state, their catharsis. Because if they trigger a catharsis in you and you start going off the rails, now you've got two trains twerking in the wilderness while the jungle's on fire. And that's no good for anybody, particularly the passengers. So um, think about it if it resonates. Yeah. And another thing, Trump's ballroom. Um, it's it's unfathomable to me how American culture or society. I mean, I guess in a way we tolerate because we have better things to do, and I would say a good 70%, um, whatever percentage it is that doesn't vote. Uh, I mean, they pay attention, but it's not a big investment. Their investment is elsewhere. Family, home, children, farm, work, um, and or career, a book they're reading, going on an adventure, traveling. Uh, so the actual physical revolution or pushback would most likely occur if it were around a governor or someone local. Um, but on a nationwide scale, I think that the president, although his ratings are below what Nixon's were when he resigned, um, it's more abstract, let's say, and people wave it away a little easier than they would say finding out that their county mayor is a drug czar. So, or their next door neighbor is the czar to the county mayor. Um, so back to this ballroom thing. It just goes to show you the level of the mental health crisis in America specifically. I can't necessarily compare it. I could compare it to Britain, but King Charles, he was here recently visiting, talking about what a great republic and democracy America has, which is, you can't really have both, by the way. Um, Ultimately, it's a republic and owned by corporations and the influence of APAC and the military industrial complex and various CIA ops that are happening throughout the world to overthrow governments and take resources and massage third world countries into more and more uh, exasperated culling, and it's a America has been just as much of a pariah state as Israel has been. Um, they share that in common for sure, and the decadence of the like if you look at the decadence and the working class, there's such a huge gulf between the 1% and the 99. I think that with the right combination of sequences of events and depending on how it's all orchestrated, not by the human mind, but just by circumstance and uh, non-coincidental events that just provoke the right things to happen to create the perfect storm. America definitely has the ingredients for a perfect storm in the next year or two, maybe 3. We'll see. Uh, but I feel like I don't really want to talk too much about Trump's ballroom. Um, it's just a sad um, situation. It's such a kind of a spit in the face of the common man and woman, worker, uh, struggling family, um, struggling individuals to be building a nonsensical thing that is basically a symbol of the Epstein class. And yeah, the Epstein class has been around a long time. Um, Thomas Jefferson's so called mistress was 14 years old. I've covered that before in another video on this channel. Um, so the Epstein class, as far as a part of American bourgeois psychopathy, has been around since the beginning. Um, and the implications are pretty diabolical. Um, I won't go there tonight in this video. Probably not for YouTube anyway. But let's just say that with 235 years plus of legal chattel slavery, um, I would say that there's a lot of extraordinary bardos debts that have yet to be paid by all sorts of family trees that are still rooted and creating offspring, and that psychology and that mentality is rampant and always has been in America, but it's just more transparent these days. Um, Again, as I've stressed in other videos, the only way I see out is through prioritizing mental health and a complete uh, rehauling of what it means to be human, and how to dismantle the ego of or egos of identifying as a nationality or a culture or a religion. The more we specify our differences, uh, the deeper entrenched the ego becomes, the more sophisticated it becomes. Um, and the harder it is to unweave from a tapestry that needs some serious cleaning. Um, Maybe it's just a psychotic exaggeration or extreme of an aspect that could be healthy as far as cultural identity goes or religious identity. Um, but identity, although it's by default, you build a persona starting around the age of, say, 9, 8, 9, 10, 11, and upwards, but particularly around things start to kind of settle in anywhere from 16 on to like 24. And that stuff's going to happen irregardless. But I feel like the priorities, um, need to be looked at as far as influences, um, superstitions, stories, uh, people believe that aren't true. Propaganda these days um, is not helping people build solid, reasonable personas. Information creates psyches, not the psyche itself, but let's say it affects the psyche, and so people will mimic the information. The nature of the information will trigger the nature of an individual, and they'll start mimicking, or not they, but the human will start mimicking the information, and things can be very dangerous and destructive. Indoctrination ultimately is one example of how information creates people. Although it's transient, it's not necessarily permanent, but it just depends on how long you've been with the information and whether you want out, and how events occur that bring that desire about. Because many people don't want out; they're fine um, in the angst that's being being angst ridden is part of their identity, and I get that. Um, to each their own. It's a school, and the only rule is your attendance, and the classrooms are anyone's guess. It's uh, it's rough. It's really rough these days. Uh, but there's also good things happening too. So um, not to forget that. I'm going to be getting into some poetry. I haven't written as much as I used to. Writing was one of my first ways to express myself art wise. I started quite young, maybe when I was 16, 16, 17, maybe a little earlier. Um, and it was the only constant form of expression all through uh, all the way up until like maybe 6 or 7 years ago. It's been a while. It's been so long. I don't even know the last time I've written a short story or a poem. But I'm going to be digging into the archives and uh, finding out what's what, and doing some performance pieces. And I'd appreciate any feedback that you'd like to leave in the comment section. Uh, please be kind. I'm still developing the channel, and yeah, and I look forward to meeting others, connecting, and possibly even having some guests on. Uh, but for now, it's mainly recording and practice, just speaking, sharing, and moving forwards, being consistent and routine with it. So thank you. Thank you for listening, and wish you well out there. Tricky times, very, very tricky times. Please leave a comment if you'd like and subscribe, share the channel. And I wish you a good rest of the week ahead. Good night.